I remember the day I met Alex like it was yesterday. I was sitting in a small, not very cozy, but in my own way familiar and even native diner, the very place where I could hide from the rain, isolate myself from the hustle and bustle of the city and temporarily forget about the endless cycle of routine worries. In front of me was a glass of cooling cheap coffee, hardly different in taste from water with a slight taste of burnt beans, but at that moment it didn't matter. I was trying to collect my scattered thoughts, replaying the events of recent weeks in my head, deciding where to move on and whether there was any point in changing anything at all. And then he came in. There was no bright flash of light, no slow motion, no spectacular musical accompaniment, like a scene from a movie where fateful meetings are always staged with excessive drama. No, everything was banal to the point of simplicity. The bell above the door rang faintly, the tart aroma of stale coffee hit the nose, mixed with the smell of rain and the subtle notes of his aftershave. I looked up, not really expecting to see anything unusual, but my gaze immediately came across his figure, tall, with a confident bearing. He looked around the room with a quick but attentive glance, lingering on me a little longer than necessary. "Is this place occupied?" His voice was soft, but clear enough to snap me out of my own thoughts. I involuntarily raised my eyebrows, glancing briefly at the empty chair opposite. "It looks free, I think," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm and indifferent, but perhaps there was a hint of interest in it. He smiled broadly, casually, the way people smile who are used to ease of communication, those who know how to endear themselves to an interlocutor. That was the beginning of our conversation, as natural as if we had known each other for days. He spoke enthusiastically, with the very vivacity that involuntarily infects the interlocutor, and I caught myself thinking that I had not felt such ease in communication for a long time. We discussed everything from the ridiculous little things, like which pizza filling deserves to be called the best, spoiler, it's definitely pineapple, and argue with me if you can, to deeper and more important things that for some reason were unexpectedly easy to discuss with him. It hasn't been long, and our chance meetings have turned into something more. We met, and it was no longer just light conversations over a cup of mediocre coffee. Something arose between us that was difficult to fit into dry definitions. It seemed like I had known him all my life. Our relationship was so easy and natural. And before we could realize how serious things were, talking about the future wasn't just hypothetical. We were actually discussing what our home would be like, how we would spend our years together, how we would travel, and what traditions we would establish. And that's when the drama began. His parents were peculiar. No, not like that. They were a real test of strength. When I met them for the first time, I felt, to put it mildly, out of place. It was like being brought on stage in front of an audience of thousands without preparation, without a text, without a single chance of salvation. They looked at me with that expression on their faces that makes you involuntarily check if you're okay, as if assessing whether I'm worthy of their precious son. "So you're the girl Alex keeps yapping about?" His mother's voice was polite, but the politeness was cold, with a hint of superiority, as if each word concealed a carefully disguised condemnation. "Guilty," I replied, trying to smile, even though I felt in my gut that I was already in their crosshairs. The conversation lasted a long time, but it was predictably formal, and towards the end they made it clear to me that if it came to the wedding, we would have to sign a prenuptial agreement. To be honest, I didn't give a damn about their money, but the fact that they set conditions so easily hurt me. "I'll sign your prenuptial agreement," I said without flinching, "but on one condition. If one of us cheats, the cheater will pay 100,000. Alex stared at me as if I'd just offered him a raw egg with a shell. "Baby, I will never cheat on you," he said, sincere confidence sounding in his voice. "Yes?" "Well, my ex said the same thing, and then I found him in bed with someone else." "Literally." "So it's either that or nothing." He agreed. His parents did too, although their faces resembled stone masks. It was clear that they did not expect such courage from me. That seemed to be the end of it. But how wrong we were. One evening, when we were already living together, we were lying on our old, rickety sofa, which we vowed to replace, but never did, because it became our place of comfort. The TV was on, but we weren't watching it. We were making plans, dreaming, discussing our trip to Italy, which we couldn't afford, but we were going to make it happen anyway. Alex, think about it. Food, wine, art. We have to go. I spoke excitedly, turning over in my mind the pictures of the narrow streets of Venice, where the air is saturated with the aroma of fresh pastries, and everywhere there are soft conversations, laughter, splashes of water from passing gondolas. I saw us there. He was holding my hand. We were drinking tart red wine in a small family restaurant, inhaling the smell of the sea breeze and getting lost in the labyrinths of bridges and alleys. Alex laughed, hugging me tighter, his voice full of tenderness and at the same time a slight mockery. Emily, baby, you hooked me up with food, but let's face it, he leaned closer, as if sharing some conspiratorial secret with me. Our bank account right now is more like camping in the backyard than a romantic trip to Venice. I playfully nudged him in the side, pouting and trying to look outraged, although in fact I couldn't help but smile. This way we will save money, I exclaimed, grabbing his hands as if convincing him of the greatest idea in the world. We will reduce the cost of what we don't need. I dunno, like your video games. Alex dramatically clutched at his heart, as if I had just dealt him a fatal blow. Oh, the horror. Not video games. Take my shirts, my shoes, even my favorite coffee maker, but leave the games alone. I burst out laughing, and he pulled me to him, burying his face in my hair. It was just like us, always dreaming of more, but standing firm on the ground, knowing that not everything in life depends on money, and yet finding a way to laugh even at our difficulties. We were happy. But happiness, as I realized a long time ago, is not just about big moments, grandiose gestures, or expensive trips. It was the little things that really mattered. The way Alex made me breakfast every Saturday, even though he couldn't cook to save his life. The way he kept making his terrible coffee, which we drank together anyway. Hey, I think it's morning for scrambled eggs. How do you see it? What is it? He asked one day, already heading for the kitchen, without even waiting for an answer. Only if you promise not to burn the toast this time. I laughed, settling down at the table. Then you make coffee too. He shouted back, and I had no choice but to obediently get up and do what I was really doing better. This was our life, filled with these small but important rituals, habits that made us us. But one day, over morning coffee, a topic came up that we carefully avoided. We washed the dishes after breakfast, standing side by side at the sink, and even this routine, mundane task suddenly seemed like something special to me, simply because we did it together. Emily, we need to talk about, starting a family, Alex said, breaking the comfortable silence. I froze with the plate in my hand, wiping it with a kitchen towel, but not looking up. I know. Simply. It's scary, isn't it? I took a deep breath, trying to find the words that wouldn't betray all the worry that lived in me. What if we don't succeed? Alex turned to me, putting down the towel, his gaze gentle but insistent. Then we'll get through this together. But we won't know until we try, right? I mean, how hard can it be? I chuckled, unable to hold back a smile, even though my laughter sounded both nervous and loving. Famous last words, baby. But it was true. No matter what our fears were, no matter what the obstacles were, we always dealt with them together. However, over time, it turned out to be more difficult to handle than we expected. We wanted a baby, we really wanted it. But with each passing month, when our attempts failed, the pressure grew. It came not only from within, but also from outside. Especially from his mother's side. Judy has never been a tactful woman, but lately her questions and hints have become more insistent. Emily, dear, when will you finally give me grandchildren? What is it? She asked with a smile that had no warmth in it. You're not getting any younger, I bit my tongue, smiled, and replied with a standard phrase that was supposed to calm her down. "We're working on it, aren't we, Alex?" And he always intervened, putting his hand on my shoulder, protecting me from her taunts, even though I knew that inside him, too, the same doubts gnawed at me. "Mom, leave me alone. These things take time." But the more time passed, the more this invisible weight pressed down. And Judy, as if sensing the moment when our nerves became taut as strings, decided that now she could say whatever came to her mind. Her remarks became more sarcastic. Her questions are prickly. And her looks, oh, how they said more than words. Every Sunday lunch at his parents' place turned into a challenge. But that Sunday afternoon, when everything finally got out of control, I realized that Judy was never going to stop. She came into the kitchen just as Alex and I were about to sit down at the table. Her deliberately light step, her too sweet smile were harbingers of an impending storm. And this time, she wasn't going to limit herself to hints. The air in the room was so tense that it seemed like it could be cut with a knife. As soon as Judy entered, her sharp gaze swept over the table, the plates, and every detail of the decoration, as if she were conducting a military inspection, carefully assessing whether everything met her standards. I knew that look. I knew that it would be followed by words filled with venom, disguised as innocent comments. "Isn't that weird?" she drawled, her voice dripping with sarcasm, and her lips twitched with the same smile she used when she intended to hurt me. "You really outdid yourself, Emily. I see you've been working in the kitchen all morning." I took a deep breath, trying to keep the peace, and smiled tightly, even though everything inside was clenched with anger. "It's nothing special, Judy." I tried to make my voice light, as if her remark hadn't offended me, as if it had just slipped by. "Just something simple and fast. Please, sit down." As soon as everyone sat down at the table, a barrage of criticism began, from which I had already given up hoping to defend myself. "Seriously, Emily," she began, filling her voice with condescension, pretending to be making casual small talk, even though every syllable was carefully chosen to hurt. "I was talking to Mrs. Henderson the other day, and do you know what she said? Her grandson was born. A boy, a healthy, sturdy kid. And that got me thinking. When will you and Alex finally give me the good news?" I felt heat flood my cheeks, a mixture of embarrassment and anger fighting inside me, demanding an outlet. I didn't have to look in Alex's direction to realize that he was staring at his plate, avoiding my gaze. But still, I turned my head, hoping that he would say something, that his voice would end this torture, that he would take my side. "Mom, come on," he muttered, but his words sounded so uncertain, so weak that they had absolutely no meaning. And Judy, of course, knew it. She continued, relentless, like a tank sweeping away everything in its path. "Alex, dear, I don't want to be cruel, but you're not a charity," she said, cutting a piece of meat from her plate with such concentration, as if her words had no weight. "You work hard for your money, and tell me, why spend it on Emily if she can't fulfill her basic duties as a wife?" I froze as if I'd just been punched in the face. "A cleaner and a cook," Judy continued, not even looking in my direction, "would be much more effective. Don't you agree?" That was the moment when something in me broke. "Judy," I heard my voice. It was steady, but everything inside me was boiling. "I'm trying my best. That doesn't mean I don't want children. And as for the house and cooking, I didn't know that marriage is a service contract." She slowly looked up at me and grinned like a predator scenting wounded prey. "Well, it's not a free ride either, is it?" Her voice was soft, but every word stuck into me like needles. "You have responsibilities, Emily. And, to be honest, it doesn't look like you're doing them yet." There was a tense silence in the room, and I felt tears coming to my eyes. But it wasn't her words that hurt me the most, it was Alex's silence. He finally spoke. But not to protect me. Yes, Mom's right, he said, and his voice, although it sounded uncertain, was still full of the same tiredness that I had noticed for a long time, but was afraid to admit. Maybe we should think about getting someone to help around the house. It could make your life easier. Make my life easier. I stared at him, not believing that he had actually said that. It was then that I realized that I was alone in this war. Over the next few days, Judy's visits became even more frequent, and each time her criticism became sharper, more precise, more painful. She would enter the house as if she owned it, look around, her lips curling into a slight smile, and then her constant comments would follow. "Do you call it clean?" "What is it?" she asked with a playful intonation, but with an expression on her face as if there was a real pigsty in front of her. Oh, my eyes must be deceiving me, because I'm seeing something completely different. I clenched my fists, restraining myself, trying not to react, not to show that her words hurt me, but she didn't stop. The following were the comments about my appearance. "Is that what you wear at home?" Judy looked at my comfortable home clothes with an expression like it was something shameful. "You know, a wife should dress in such a way as to please her husband." I took a deep breath, but she was already going on. "No wonder Alex is always so tired. He has to come home to this." I pressed my lips together, forcing myself to breathe evenly. "Judy," I said slowly, keeping the tremor out of my voice, "I'm not dressing for Alex. I dress for myself." "Oh, of course, darling, of course." Her smile was almost sympathetic. "Just think about it. Men, you know, like it when their wives try." I looked at her, realizing that in her eyes I would always be not good enough. No matter what I did, no matter what words I said, she had already given her verdict. And nothing could change it. Alex's position, or rather, the lack of it, was the most painful betrayal. Every evening, after his mother left our house, leaving behind a heavy trail of venomous comments, displeased looks, and unspoken accusations, an argument broke out between Alex and me. I couldn't understand how he could let her treat me like I was an unwanted guest in my own home, as if he didn't see how much her words hurt me, how much they were undermining our marriage from the inside. "Why don't you stick up for me, Alex?" My voice sounded tired, but it still held the bitterness accumulated over many weeks of her attacks. "She's trampling on both of us, and you're just letting her." Alex rubbed his face wearily with his hands, as if this conversation was no less painful for him than for me. "Emily, she's old," he muttered, as if that would justify anything. "She has her own way of looking at things, you know how she is." "What do you want me to do?" Kicked out his own mother? I clenched my hands tighter, resisting the urge to scream. "No," I breathed, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. "But I want you to be my husband. I want you to be with me, not with her." At that moment, I realized that it had long been more than just Judy, not her disapproval, not her perpetually displeased look, and not her venomous remarks. It was all about us. It was about how strong our marriage was, whether we could stand the test or let Judy's criticism tear us apart at the seams. The days turned into weeks, and it soon became apparent that this was not just a series of unpleasant moments. It was a full-scale siege, and if we did not do anything to protect what we had, then perhaps soon there would be nothing left that could be saved. The tension between Alex and me grew every day. His touches became less frequent, his kisses shorter, and his conversations quieter. But it wasn't just Judy who was the problem. Something has changed. Something about him. He began to behave strangely. At first, I attributed it to stress, to his busyness, to the tension at home, but over time this feeling, this dull, sticky feeling of anxiety that settled in my chest, became stronger and stronger. It all started with phone calls. Alex had never made a secret of his phone before. He left it on the table, answered calls in front of me, and even lazily scrolled through messages while lying next to me. But now something has changed. As soon as the bell rang, he would leave the room, casually throwing, It's for work. And the same name always appeared on the screen, John at work. Who is John at work? I asked one evening, trying to sound as casual as possible, when he got up from dinner again to answer the phone. Alex shuddered. It was a barely noticeable gesture, almost imperceptible, but I noticed. Oh, just a new guy in the office, he shrugged, looking away. A lot of questions. You know how it is. I nodded, pretending to believe him. But that wasn't all. Alex, who was so far from fashion that he could wear the same t-shirt for weeks on end, suddenly began to take care of his appearance. Gone are the days of worn jeans and stretched sweaters. Now it was ironed shirts, perfectly fitting trousers, and even cologne. Alex was wearing cologne. Since when did he care how he smelled? What's the new look? Did you get an interview or something? I joked one morning, watching him comb his hair carefully in front of the mirror, in a way I'd never seen before. He grinned, but his smile was too quick, too light, as if it had been prepared in advance. I just wanted to change something. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Of course it wasn't. But there was something else. Late nights at the office had become a regular occurrence for him. Another long night? I texted him, trying not to sound too needy. I'm sorry, this project is killing me. I won't be late, I promise. But the clock was ticking, and after midnight I was still sitting in the dark, listening to the silence that spread through our apartment like cold water. Something was wrong. I felt it in every cell, every nerve, every part of me. And in the end, I couldn't stand it. I should have known for sure. I hired a private investigator. It sounded absurd, like a scene from a cheap TV show, but I could no longer live in this sticky web of doubt, in an endless feeling of anxiety that I could not get rid of. A week later, he handed me an envelope. A plain brown envelope containing everything that could kill me once and for all. I knew what was inside even before I opened it. And yet, when I pulled out the photos, when I saw them, Alex and her, when I looked at their intertwined fingers, at their gazes filled with tenderness, when I saw how he kissed her, how he smiled at her with that smile that once belonged only to me, something inside me it broke off. But the photos weren't the scariest part. The recording was scarier. Their conversations, words filled with warmth that has not been heard in our house for a long time, their plans, dreams, promises. And the most painful thing was the way he talked to her. The way he used to talk to me. They were in love. Or at least he was in love with her. I sat there, looking at the table in front of me, at the photographs and recordings of conversations spread out on its surface, which, in a cold, impartial document, recorded the betrayal of the man I once called my soulmate, the one I trusted more than myself. In these proofs, in these stolen moments captured by the camera lens, there was a frozen truth, undeniable, irreversible, inexorable. I could have thrown the evidence in his face, demanded an explanation, screamed, forced him to confess, but I knew I wasn't ready for that confrontation yet. Not yet. I needed a plan. I needed time. I needed to survive the collapse of our marriage, preserving my dignity, coming out of this battle not as a victim, but as a winner. The next few days passed as if in a fog, in some absurd performance where I played the role of an ideal wife, smiled where I wanted to cry, said kind words when hatred stuck in my throat, and supported the game that Alex stubbornly continued to play, unaware that I already knew the whole truth. Each of our conversations was like a skillful dance around what was left unsaid. "Everything okay, huh? You're so quiet," he asked, his voice filled with concern that might have seemed sincere if I hadn't known the tone he was using with her. "Yes, I'm just tired, the job was crazy," I replied, feeling the taste of lies on my tongue, bitter like stale coffee. I could have continued to play this farce for a long time, but everything changed in one completely ordinary evening. I was walking down the hall, heading for the bedroom, when I heard muffled voices coming from the slightly ajar door of Alex's office. I wasn't going to eavesdrop. But something in their intonation, in that intense, dull seriousness, made me freeze in place. I'm telling you, Mom, I can't do this anymore. Alex's voice was harsh, irritated, but at the same time it sounded tired, old, heavy as a lead weight. It's not just about the kids. I lost all feelings for her. We live as roommates, not as husband and wife. The air in my lungs became thick, and I felt as if I were being crushed to the floor. Of course you feel that way, Judy replied in her perpetually harsh, contemptuous tone. She didn't give you a baby, and let's be honest, what else did she bring to this marriage? I bit my tongue until it bled, trying not to give myself away, not to grit my teeth, not to exhale too loudly, because that might give me away. But let's not rush it, she continued, and I felt a chill run down my spine. My 70th birthday is coming up, and we don't want to miss the opportunity to receive a generous gift from her, do we? Every word bit into me like shards of glass, cutting me from the inside. And then, Alex continued, his voice cold, calculating, almost alien. When we have everything in our hands, we can get rid of her. Honey, just give it a little more time, Judy purred. There was something snake-like and sinister in her voice. A little patience, and she will leave on her own, and if not, we'll help her. I stood in the hallway, digging my nails into my palms, trying not to moan from the pain that seemed to squeeze my ribs, forcing all the air out of me. They talked about me as something inanimate, as an unnecessary thing that could just be dumped, as a problem that would solve itself. The shock that paralyzed me for a moment was soon replaced by something else. Burning, unbridled rage. They thought they could use me and then throw me away when it was convenient for them. They thought that I would accept my fate without a murmur. They were wrong. A few days later, over a family dinner that had long been more like a game of pretense than a warm welcome for loved ones, Judy, predictably, started talking about her upcoming birthday. "Oh, Alex, dear," she said, with that same smirk I'd learned to despise. "There's only a week left. I'm so excited. Have you already chosen a gift for me?" I picked up a glass of wine and took a leisurely sip, enjoying the way its tartness burned my throat. "Oh, I'm sure Alex will choose something truly unforgettable," I said, staring at him intently. I saw him tense up a little, as a fleeting shadow passed over his face, as his fingers gripped the fork a little tighter. He knew. He knew I was suspicious. But I still didn't realize how far I was going to go. She leaned a little closer to me, her well-groomed fingers with long, carefully polished nails folded in a gesture of impatient expectation, her gaze fixed on me with the same expression with which a predator watches its prey, convinced that the outcome of the fight has already been decided. "Emily, honey, what are you planning for my birthday?" "Something special, I hope." Her voice, as always, oozed fake sweetness, spreading sticky syrup over every word, but behind this feigned gentleness there was something else, demanding, insistent, confident that I, of course, had already prepared everything, that I, like a submissive puppet, obediently performed my role. I met her gaze, keeping a mask of serene calm on my face, even though a hurricane of emotions was raging inside me: disgust, pent-up anger, bitter anticipation of the moment when I could turn their own game against them. "Actually, Judy," I replied evenly, "I thought such a special day deserved a truly unforgettable evening. I plan to arrange a dinner for you at the most luxurious restaurant in the city, a night that you will definitely not forget." I noticed how her lips stretched into a satisfied smile, and her eyes, in which a greedy gleam flashed, slid towards Alex. They thought they had won. They thought that I was still in their power, that I was cornered, broken, deprived of any will to fight. How wrong they were. "Oh, Emily," Judy drawled with mock delight, "that sounds amazing. Only close relatives, of course. We must maintain an intimate atmosphere." I smiled, letting the words roll from my lips softly, smoothly, almost submissively. "Of course, Judy. It will be a pleasant evening for all of us." The taste of those words was like ashes, but I swallowed them without a shadow of a doubt, knowing that soon their carefully constructed illusion would collapse with a bang, deafening them with its inevitability. The days leading up to her 70th birthday dragged by slowly, like a viscous, cobweb-covered play in which all the actors already knew their role, but were not yet aware of the final act. Every smirk she gave me, every smug shrug of Alex's shoulders, and every cold look he gave me over his shoulder only fueled my resolve. They thought they were playing a game, but I was already 2 steps ahead. The plan was simple, but in its simplicity, it was elegant, like a perfectly honed scam. Arrange a sumptuous dinner under the guise of love and respect, surround them with the luxury they longed for, let them believe that everything is going according to their script, and then drop a bomb, detonate their carefully woven lies. But, as with any good performance, the devil is in the details. On the eve of dinner, the tension in the house was almost palpable. I could feel him on the instinctual level, like a taut string ready to snap from any careless movement. Alex, completely oblivious to the impending storm, was sprawled serenely on the couch, idly scrolling through the news feed on his phone. "Is everything planned for tomorrow?" "What is it?" he asked casually, not even bothering to look at me. I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. "You could say that," I replied, my voice light, but a hurricane was raging inside me, ready to burst out at the right moment. He nodded, completely unaware of what was coming. "But he'll find out. Very soon. The day has come." Guests began to fill the luxurious private dining room of the restaurant, chosen specifically for Judy's celebration. The air was thick with anticipation, mixed with the aromas of expensive wine, restrained conversations, and muffled laughter. But my heart wasn't pounding with excitement. It was pumping with adrenaline. I watched Judy, how she shone in the spotlight, how her well-groomed hands were decorated with expensive rings, how her voice, slightly louder than usual, reverberated in the hall, attracting maximum attention to her. "Oh, Emily, you've outdone yourself," she exclaimed, her voice full of self-satisfaction easily cutting through the evening bustle. "This place is simply exquisite." She spoke loudly enough so that people at the neighboring tables could hear her words, because, of course, attention to herself was the most important thing for her. We sat down, the waiters brought the dishes, and the evening flowed on as usual, laughter, stories, polite compliments, but underneath it all there was a tension, a hidden falseness, because it was not a holiday. It was a war. And then, when the dessert plates were cleared away, the waiter came over, holding the bill in his hands. "Gentlemen," he said politely, leaning toward us, "the cost of the dinner was $33,000. A faint shadow of surprise ran through the room, and someone's eyes darted to us, but I didn't give Judy even a split second to react. I silently took out my card and handed it to the waiter. The gesture was quick, light, almost imperceptible. But then everything changed. Alex, who was sitting next to her, suddenly slowly straightened up, and his voice, harsh but carefully measured, broke the tense silence. "Emily," he said, and there was a forced seriousness in his tone, as fake as anything he'd ever told me. "I think it's time for everyone to find out." He paused, savoring the moment, confident that he had the situation under control. "I'm tired of this. I want a divorce." The words, filled with cold finality, hung in the air like a poisonous cloud, drowning out all other sounds in the room. I felt eyes turn to us, people freeze, and someone inhale sharply. But before I could open my mouth, before I had a chance to breathe out what I had been preparing for so long, another voice rang out. "Well, since it's become obvious," Judy said loudly, and her words hit the air like a whip, "I think you'd better leave, Emily." I turned my head, meeting her icy, triumphant gaze. "We're celebrating a family evening," she continued, her lips curling into a mocking smile. "And you are no longer a part of this family." I slowly put the glass of wine on the table. And she smiled. Because they had no idea what kind of blow awaited them in return. The room was plunged into dead silence, filled with expectation, tension, predatory anticipation of the audience hoping to see my collapse. All eyes were on me, as if they were watching the last moments of a losing player, the fall of a piece cornered, the humiliation that, in their opinion, should have crushed me, made me break, but I did not give them this pleasure. With a calmness I didn't feel, I slowly stood up, nodded, and without saying a single word, headed for the exit, leaving behind the farce that this evening had turned into. I could feel their eyes on me, I could feel the air in the room freeze, filled with unspoken questions, but I didn't care anymore. The cold night air hit me in the face like a slap in the face, piercing through, but I only took a deeper breath, allowing this sharpness to finally clear my thoughts of the last illusion, of the last attachment to what once was. With every step that brought me closer to a home that could no longer be called ours, the finality of everything that had happened came crashing down on me in waves, washing away the last remnants of the past, but at the same time a new determination flared up, cold as steel. By the time I entered the apartment, his apartment, the plan was already fully formed. I didn't throw a tantrum, I didn't let my emotions control me. That would be weakness, and weakness meant defeat. With cold-blooded concentration, I began to pack my things, taking away only what really belonged to me, allowing them to keep this whole house for themselves, soaked with lies and betrayal. Every move was precise, thoughtful, and every action brought me closer to a new life, one in which neither Alex nor his mother or their vile intrigues were present. As I was zipping up the last suitcase, the phone vibrated on the bedside table, insistently, demanding, as if trying to pull me out of a state of concentrated indifference. It took me a while to pick it up, but eventually curiosity got the better of me. Judy's name appeared on the screen. I chuckled. How predictable. I put the phone to my ear, but I didn't say anything, just listened. Emily. Judy's voice was like the shrill screech of an angry harpy. The payment failed. You have to fix this right away. I closed my eyes, allowing myself to enjoy the irony of that moment for a moment. They planned to use me, squeeze everything out of me, and then throw me away. But, as in any game, the one who thinks he's smarter than everyone else usually becomes a victim of his own self-confidence. I secured a way out by taking over control. I blocked our shared account, knowing that this would be the first thing they would try to resort to. Oh, Judy, I drawled, savoring every word. What a pity. But since I'm no longer part of the family, as you so eloquently put it, I'm afraid you'll have to deal with it yourself. There was an ominous silence on the other end of the line, followed by a sharp intake of breath. She was trying to find the words, but her indignation was almost palpable, like a thick, poisonous fog spreading through the phone. You, how dare you? Her voice rose to a screech, full of anger and impotent rage. It was music to my ears. The perfect backdrop for the finale of their own play. I hung up the phone. Later, I learned from the rumors, which spread faster than fire on dry grass, that everything turned into chaos. The restaurant staff demanding immediate payment, Judy's hysteria reaching the brink of a scandal, Alex's attempts to resolve the situation, calls to the bank that brought no results, and finally the arrival of the police, called to calm the raging old woman, who seemed unable to realize that her time was up. In the end, they had to pay the bill themselves, raise the money to prevent further embarrassment. Poetic retribution. For their betrayal. For their humiliation. For every blow they've dealt me. The next morning, when the sun had already risen above the horizon, painting the city in the warm, deceitful shades of a new day, I returned to the house that I once called my own, for the last time. I had a folder with documents in my hand. I crossed the threshold, and the air crackled with tension that could literally be cut with a knife. Alex and Judy were there. I found them at the moment of the quarrel. Their voices were harsh, irritated, as if they could not come to an agreement on who to blame for the failure of their dirty scheme. But when they saw me, their hostility instantly turned to me, as if I were a common enemy, uniting them in a single outburst of hatred. You still dare to come here? Alex jumped up from his chair, his eyes flashing, and there was furious venom in his voice. You've disgraced us in front of the whole city, Judy exclaimed, pursing her lips, her face contorted with anger. Do you know what it feels like when the police calm you down? People were laughing. They were shooting a video. I looked at them calmly, without feeling the slightest shame. They thought they had ruined me. But they were destroyed. Do you think that this is your biggest problem right now? My voice was low, but sharp as a knife. I walked over to the table and let go of the folder, letting it open, scattering the evidence in front of them. The divorce papers. Photos of Alex cheating. I saw his face contort as the color began to drain from his skin, as his mother looked over his shoulder, and her anger instantly turned into shock, and then into panic. They understood. They understood the scale of what I had in my hands. And let's not forget about the prenup, okay? I bowed my head slightly, letting the words soak into the air, reminding them of the very clause they so despised but agreed to sign. Treason. $100,000. Alex opened his mouth, but no words came out. Judy clutched her heart as if she was about to have a stroke. And I realized that I had one. I continued, my voice steady, confident, not leaving a single hint of doubt, because doubts ended a long time ago, from the very moment I saw the photos, heard their conversation, realized how deep they were willing to go to get rid of me. You lied. You're paying. I paused briefly, giving him a chance to realize the inevitability of what was happening. $100,000, to be exact. Judy's face contorted, her lips twitched, curling into a grimace that could have been called a smile if there hadn't been so much desperation and anger in it. You wouldn't dare. Her voice was breaking into a growl. She was leaning forward, her eyes were flashing lightning. They were filled with the same predatory, aggressive expression that she always used to suppress others, to break them, to force them to do as she wanted. You can't do this to us. I looked at her, at Alex, who was standing next to her, too stunned to react right away, and grinned. Oh, but I can. I paused, letting my words float with icy certainty through the air. And I will. Alex finally realized the reality of the situation and changed tactics. He raised his hands, as if he wanted to muffle the impending collapse, smooth out the sharp edges. Please, let's talk about this. There was something new in his voice, something that once could have knocked the ground out from under my feet, but now it only caused bitter mockery. We can fix this. I laughed. The laugh was short, harsh, full of irony and disgust, because he really believed that everything could be turned around just by throwing in a few convincing phrases. Fix it? I looked at him, at his confused face, at the hidden fear in his eyes. Do you really think you can just cancel everything? In a few words? I took a step forward, leaving only the air between us, filled with something that could not be forgotten. No, Alex. Everything has already been done. Judy, who has always been a clever manipulator, always knew which strings to press, tried to change tactics. Coming closer, her voice became sweet, like honey spreading over a knife. Emily, darling, think about what you're doing. Her tone was almost pleading, but I could hear the panicked desperation in it, the realization that her power was crumbling. It will ruin us. I tilted my head, smiling slightly, as if reflecting on her words. That ship has already sailed, Judy. I paused, enjoying the moment of complete and unconditional victory. You should have thought of that sooner. The realization flashed in their eyes that this game was lost, but they were still trying to maintain control, to find a way to turn the situation around. They turned to pleading, desperate to save what could still be saved. But I've already made my decision. I was no longer a victim. I broke their web of lies and manipulations. And in the end, Alex had no choice but to borrow money from his parents to pay me. When I left this house for the last time, holding a check in my hand. I felt incredibly light, as if the weight of all these years, all these humiliations, all this pain, which, it turns out, was not my burden, had finally been lifted from my shoulders. After everything went wrong, I used the payout from Alex to make a down payment for a small but cozy apartment. And do you know how much peace you can find in the walls of a place that belongs only to you? Where does every corner seem like a refuge from the chaos of the past? Life is quieter now. And I like it. I have a job that keeps me busy neighbors who just nod and smile, not knowing what I've been through, and a small garden that I need to take care of. But sometimes the vine throws me juicy fruits. For example, Alex and Judy. Just the other day, I was having coffee at the corner spot, a small place where locals hang out, and suddenly bumped into someone from the old neighborhood. After the usual pleasantries, the interlocutor suddenly leaned towards me, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Hey, have you heard the latest drama between your ex and his mom?" I raised an eyebrow, a mixture of curiosity and detachment flashed through me. I can't say that I should know. Well, my interlocutor was clearly enjoying the moment. Judy seems to be very unhappy with Alex's new girlfriend. One word at a time. And now they're fighting like cats and dogs. I took a sip of coffee, feeling the bitter astringency of the drink echo the sweet taste of retribution that I felt deep inside. The conversation turned to another topic, but as I left, holding the cup in my hand, I realized that I no longer felt anything. There was a time when such news could have broken me, forced me to plunge into a whirlwind of emotions. But now it was just another piece of someone else's story. Now I'm more worried about whether my tomatoes will ripen before the squirrels get to them, or whether I'll finally be able to master yoga without looking like a newborn deer on ice. Life is simpler, quiet, and infinitely sweeter on this side of chaos.